Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. Finding a way to come up with some interesting, great sounding lines for fast moving turnarounds like the ones you find in a rhythm change can be quite the challenge. And one way that I found works really well for me when I'm trying to improvise is to think in other chords, just to get some new ideas and find some other arpeggios and some other way of connecting the chords. So that's what I want to go over in this video. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, about improvising over chord changes and checking out some interesting arpeggios and scales, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. This lick is on the basic turnaround in a B-flat rhythm changes progression. So that means that it's B-flat major 7, G7, C minor 7, and then F7, back to B-flat. When we're improvising on this, we're kind of just taking small blocks for each of those chords and trying to connect them together to one, hopefully good sounding lick over the entire 2 bars. And it can be difficult to come up with these different blocks, and that really has to do with the fact that when you're playing for 2 beats on 1 chord and you still want to keep it kind of clear, then it's difficult to really come up with something that's not going to be just the arpeggio or an inversion of the arpeggio like I'm using here. Because what I'm doing in this line is just playing a B-flat 6 arpeggio and then a first inversion G7. For the C minor, I'm coming out of on the E flat and then just first a scale 1 and then down to the 5th, and then that leads me into a line with a 3rd on the F7 and then just down to the root, down the arpeggio to the 7th, resolving to D on the B-flat major 7. Those kind of lines, of course you can do a lot with just playing the arpeggios, but it's still only one kind of sound and it's difficult to come up with something, and you can't really be free to develop too much stuff. So one way of introducing some more material is to just start playing with some chord substitutions and then just playing them on top of the normal accompaniment. So that means that I'll be thinking other chords when I'm soloing, but I'm just using that to come up with some other melodic ideas instead of just thinking on the G7. So the first example of that could be to take B-flat and then instead of playing a G7, I'll play a B diminished, which is pretty much the same scale and the same kind of sound, but it's just helping me think of something else in terms of what I'll play on it. C minor, and then maybe instead of the F7, I can play a B7, like this, which is the Tritone substitution. And then I have a line like this. Instead of using a B-flat major 7, we can also turn it into a 3-6-2-5 instead of a 1-6-2-5. So that means that the first chord is going to be a D minor chord. And then we can make a tritone substitution on the G7, which we did already on the F7, and then that's going to turn that into a D-flat 7. This is the equivalent of playing G7 altered, in fact. That's going to be the same scale, because they're both coming out of A-flat melodic minor. And then we can resolve that to C minor, and then just an F7 altered. And that line sounds like this. So as you can see, we get a completely different type of melody, and we kind of move the way that the melody flows in different directions because we have other notes to aim for when we're thinking the other chords. And that's really what this is about. It's not really giving us any really new things. There are no new scales or no real new sounds. It's just still about finding other ways to sort of navigate through the changes melodically and give us a few more interesting building blocks. And that's also what I'm doing here. So of course the D minor that I'm playing, which could be on top of a B-flat major 7, is just a D minor descending, so a D minor 7 arpeggio descending. And then the same idea with D-flat 7, except I'm starting on the D-flat and then from the root and down, so it's kind of a first inversion. And then on the C minor 7, here I'm using, just to start with the same idea of a descending arpeggio, I'm using an E-flat major 7. I think you could argue that I was also like, that I'm almost thinking an E-flat major 7 chord there, but really that's not what I would be doing. That doesn't mean that you can't do it like that, and if you find ways of working that makes sense to you and you can make good lines with it, then just go for it. For me, the E-flat major 7 is so much a part of what I would play on the C minor, so I'm not really thinking another chord when I'm doing that. And then we have on the F7 altered, that's just a scale run, like down to the 5th of the B-flat major 7. In this example, I'm starting to really change the chords, which means that I'm working with some other changes that don't necessarily really fit with what might be played behind you. But at the same time, the dissonance that I'm creating here is on the weak part of the bar, and it's also so fast in a tempo like you would normally play a rhythm changes that it doesn't really matter if there is some sort of clash there, because it's going to resolve 2 beats later, which is really fast. What I'm doing here is I'm playing D minor, and then down to a D flat minor 7, which doesn't necessarily fit with a G7, and then C minor, and then the final part of it is some sort of F7 altered or B7. That's a little bit open to interpretation, because what I'm playing is a B major triad. I'm really just playing the arpeggios really here. So D minor arpeggio, and then moving up a half step to start the D flat minor or C sharp minor arpeggio, and then same idea, but then just a triad on the C minor, and then we get the B major triad that I'm resolving down to B flat. In this example, I am making kind of a huge change in the chords, because instead of playing a B flat major 7, I've turned that into a D7 altered, which of course is a fairly different sound. It is the kind of thing where if you're playing a rhythm change and the tempo is more than 200 beats per minute, then the sound of a clash for half a bar is really, really fast. It's likely that nobody will really notice, and hopefully the first ones going to notice are going to be the ones that are comping you, so they'll take action. What I'm using here is of course just coming out of turning a 1-6-2-5 into a 3-6-2-5, and then finally making the 3 chord a dominant, because that will work as well. What I'm playing on the D7 is quite simply this chordal arpeggio, so, which is just the top part of this voicing really, going into B diminished arpeggio on the G7, and then on the C minor, starting on the 5th and then skipping up to the 3rd. And this is really actually an inversion of what I played in the very first example in this video, because now I'm starting on the G instead of ending on it, and the whole idea is coming out of a second inversion C minor triad, and then continuing into this F7 altered line, which is really sort of a G flat minor cliche, and then resolving that to the 5th of B flat major. So the concept here is really just to use simple substitutions that kind of sound actually pretty similar to what is really there already, but at the same time something that we can use when we're making melodies to just come up with some different kinds of melodies and get some variation inserted into our vocabulary in that way, because it is important. And it is difficult to just make lines with these fast moving changes, and you have to watch out that you don't just end up running arpeggios all the time. If you have ideas like these with some chord substitutions that you can use for these fast turnarounds to get some interesting lines, then leave a comment on this video. I think that's a really interesting topic, and I think everybody's really looking for as many possibilities as they can find. I know for certain that I am, and I'm always looking for other ways to just approach these really common but also kind of difficult progressions. So a bigger vocabulary in terms of reharmonizations is just going to give you more options when you're trying to improvise, and everybody wants that, I think. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and this is the first time you see one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. The videos that I publish here every week are on finding some solid methods and good strategies to explore all the interesting things about jazz and jazz guitar. If you like this video and you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. I'm very grateful for the support that I'm getting from my Patreon community, and it's really because of that I can keep on making videos every week. So check out my Patreon page and join us over on Patreon, and if you join us over there, I can give you something in return for your support. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and until next week.